What does it mean to give a great answer during a job interview? A great answer usually scores well on clarity of thought, is also the right length. Also, the best answers tend to be the ones that you prepare in advance for an interview question that you expected them to ask you. Also, a great interview answer is in a format that best suits your individual needs, and a great interview answer is one that you can confidently defend during a job interview. Let's start with the length. The traditional approach is that you should be concise as possible in a job interview. Reasoning being that being concise also improves your chances to score well on clarity. In my experience, even though job interviews tend to be even shorter, on the 30 minutes versus the traditional 1 hour mark these days, it's perfectly fine to communicate an answer even for 10 minutes, so long you are confident that you're not wasting your interviewer's time. So if you can make sense for 10 minutes or for the longer side at length, then I would advise you to consider lengthier interview answers when compared to shorter ones. Of course, the ideal length of your interview answer is specific to you. What qualifies as a lengthy answer for some candidates, usually on the 5 minutes mark, might qualify on the shorter side for other types of roles. Long story short here, focus on finding the right length of your interview answers. The second thing I wanted to talk about here is to find the right balance between theory and practice. In theory, in order to reach good enough interview answers, you would need a story bank with 15 to 25 stories that you would want to revise at least 3 times. The practice simply means role play, which could also be looked at as a revision. What do I mean by finding the right balance between theory, the story bank building process, and practice, that is role play? I mean that, for example, some candidates can speak incredibly well, and these candidates might feel tempted to role play even further until their answers become flat, in detriment of preparing their story bank, the 15 to 25 stories revised at least 3 times. Vice versa, some candidates prefer to enrich their story bank, maybe build up to 60 stories in their bank, because they feel this gives them strength to over-theorize. The challenge with this approach is that if you lack role play, you might as well be unintelligible during a job interview, because you cannot communicate the ideas that you prepare. So finding the right balance, what suits your needs, maybe it's the story bank building, maybe it's role play, maybe it's both. But I found this critically important, that you perform an assessment of where is your time best spent. The third element I want to talk about here would be predictability. For a long time, you would want to brainstorm, or you would want to search online for lists of commonly asked questions in a bid to do some role play. Things have evolved these days, and interview questions are quite easy to predict. So the reason you would want to search these questions online are not just because you want to role play them, but because you want to minimize the risk of being surprised in these job interviews. And this is actually a method of evolution of these job interviews. Right now, the expectation in many of these job interviews is that you're not hearing the interview questions for the first time. The classic ones, what's your weakness, or tell me about the time when you failed, and these sort of things. The expectation is that you have taken a look in advance prior to your interview on these questions. And by minimizing the risk of surprises, you also minimize the risk of getting blocked in these job interviews. Point number 4, with respect to the format of your interview answers. For a long time, the STAR format was considered the golden standard. to structure one's interview answers. And it's still, a very solid starting point, especially for beginners, to communicate your answers in these job interviews. What you should be particularly aware of is about the downsides and about the risks of templating your answers in the STAR format. The most common of them being that you front load your answers, you communicate for too much time on the situation and task. Or another major challenge with this would be that the task might not be communicated in an enough compelling way. So you'd want to transition from a task into a challenge type of approach. Instead of the STAR format, the challenge, action, and the results. But in my experience, it's becoming more and more common for candidates applying for, not for director or VP level roles, to come up with their own formats. In these job interviews, it's quite an accessible thing to do for many candidates. And this is why I wanted to suggest that you find the best format which allows you to communicate on your strength. For example, it could be as simple as communicating your problem and the fix. You addressed it by simply adding this two-step format. You could bring in a ton of clarity, especially if you have a tendency to go on the longer side in these job interviews. So find the format that best suits your needs. The STAR format is advice that worked in the past, right? And the final thing I want to talk about here would be that you should confidently be able to defend whatever you say in these job interviews. The number one trend in today's job interviews would be for candidates to try to come up with information that is not truthful, is not fundamentally truthful with respect to their stories. And this is a direct consequence of using or overusing AI to prepare, so to speak, your answers. If you'll only do a 5-minute test of asking AI 3 times of how can you improve your answers, I can guarantee you they would suggest you fake something in your stories. It could be maybe a metric, it could be the ownership of a decision, or it could simply be a process that's simply invented, so the story might sound a bit more compelling. My advice to you would be to be able to defend your stories at all costs, to be comfortable with the idea you communicate during a job interview, and to be fundamentally truthful in your interview answers, because again, the trend is otherwise. And this is one of the first things that professional interviewers look for in job interview candidates. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.